shall I say? And when we stand by, give your plan.
It was hardly past 7 that morning when the gravedigger saw the earth stir. Fingers, rotted and skeletal, burst forth from the dirt, and with force they pulled their bodies to freedom. It was happening all over the graveyard. Every grave, every square inch of dirt was overturned. Soon, there were thousands, so many more than the graveyard actually held. A horde of the undead stood before him. The gravedigger watched, with his shovel in hand. He found himself simultaneously horrified and fascinated. The creatures stumbled about. They moved with urgency, but their decrepit bodies only allowed for so much. Yelling and screaming, they started to coalesce near the center of the graveyard. They were revolting, damned souls. Just as the gravedigger went to turn, to flee, a hand gripped his shoulder. The grime soaked deep into his sleeve. It leaked down his arm. Behind him, a man, what was left of him, stared into the gravedigger's eyes. The corpse's face had long since lost its tissue, but it had eyes, returned anew to their sockets, that showed nothing but fear. The ghoul spoke to the gravedigger, and the gravedigger listened. Go, it begged of him. Please, go. What sort of madness was this? What trickery of hell? The gravedigger brought his shovel to bear, and he swung it down on the corpse. It was met with a revolting, moist crunch. The figure fell. His fingers twitched, and his skull leaked. From behind, 3 more figures came. 2 ignored the gravedigger. They bent to pick up the wounded husk at the gravedigger's feet. They dragged him on with all the strength they could muster. They carried him like a wounded ally. The 3rd figure, what had once been a woman, perhaps, spoke to the gravedigger. She pleaded. Go. Please. Tell them. The gravedigger couldn't move. He wouldn't. These fiends were no masters of him. Why did they command him so? For what purpose? Answers? He demanded answers. Why? He asked, the words falling out of his bearded face. Why aren't you in the ground? The ghoul didn't blink. She simply told him the terrible truth. Hell isn't safe anymore. Those words. The gravedigger couldn't even comprehend them. What was the meaning of them? Hell? Safe? What kind of haven was the pit of eternal damnation? What are you talking about? Had she appeared to cry, she would have let it fall. Instead, she had to use her trembling voice to convey her fears. Lucifer is dead. He killed him. He is coming. The words held no meaning for the gravedigger, for he had not been there. He had not seen the horrors that even the denizens of hell itself couldn't describe. Then, from the graves, dark figures, with eyes aflame and hatred came. They moved like smoke, and they filled the air with their sulphurous fumes. The gravedigger watched as demons, Satan's orchestrators of pain and suffering, began to assist the poor, wandering souls below. They started to stack atop each other. One by one, their bodies built the foundation. What in the name of God? He could only ponder. A collective lamenting cascaded down from the hills around. The gravedigger saw them. From every direction more hordes moved together. More undead. They lumbered forth with his cemetery in their sights. Their hellish rendezvous. The gravedigger was speechless. The ghoul instructed him. Go. To your family. We'll need them too. He questioned the request. My family? The living, the thing corrected, her gaze skyward. We'll need them too, if we are to make it. Make it? Where? The ghoul cried as she wandered forth. Urgency flooded her words. The gates! We have to make it to the gates. The gravedigger shook his head. Their aim was clear, but his teachings were concrete. What's judged is judged. He won't take you, or any of us unworthy. That stopped her, if for just a moment. She turned, for he knew nothing. We seek not redemption, she said. We damn seek to warn the righteous. The honesty in the ghoul's voice brought a heavy weight to the gravedigger's stomach. He couldn't stand. The earth below had started to tremble. The gravedigger fell to the dirt as his knees gave in, and with his face to the ground, he heard it. There was a deep, unbridled scream echoing below the surface. A demented laugh. The sound of 1,000 horned wings, an insect feet. It grew closer. Climbing. As he stood, bodies were flung atop each other as the demons and the Forgotten built their tower to salvation. Who is he? The gravedigger asked. It was his turn to plead, but the corpses said nothing. It didn't take much for the gravedigger to realize that they couldn't respond, even if they wanted to. They didn't know. As the gravedigger ran home, the ghoul uttered a final mantra under her breath. The word still tasted so alien to her, so vile and disgusting. It was all they had left. God must know that he is coming. My vision is blurred and dark as I open my eyes. I can feel immense pressure in my head as I realize that I am hanging upside down. As the clarity of my vision returns, I notice that the room I am in is completely unfamiliar to me. It looks like a dark, old, and decrepit basement from an abandoned crack house. Rotted wood, massive spider webs, and the smell of musk surround me. My initial instinct is to scream for help, but I stop myself before I do so. No, they'll hear you, I think to myself. Whoever did this, they'll hear you if you scream. Instead, I decided to put all of my focus into trying to free myself. My body is completely bound in some sort of sticky rope. I can hear the sounds of cracking as it separates and re-sticks as I wiggle around. Whatever this stuff is, there is no freeing myself from it. I begin to panic as claustrophobia begins to set in. The idea of being bound and immobilized has always been a terrifying thought for me. The pressure of the blood rushing to my head from hanging upside down for so long soon begins to affect me. My vision starts to go blurry again and the weight on my lungs begins to strain my breathing. Coupled with the anxiety of being in this predicament, I begin to lose it. My composure breaks as I begin to scream and cry. It's too much for me. Even if it means some psychopath comes and finishes me off, I can't stay like this any longer. Maybe I get lucky and my kidnapper isn't here. Maybe my screams will be heard by a passerby and they find me here. Wherever here is, I scream and cry and scream as loud as my pressured lungs will allow. My vision soon begins to darken once again, but before I pass out I notice something. There is a wooden staircase ahead of me, and I soon begin to hear the sounds of footsteps. They aren't heavy, more so they sound like someone is walking with tap-dancing shoes. Are you awake, dear? I hear a calm, distant voice from upstairs. The figure begins to slowly walk down the stairs, metallic tapping with each step. I become speechless as I notice exactly who or what the figure is. Whatever this thing is, it's not human. At first glance, because of my affected vision, it appears to be a tall, slender woman. Long tangled hair covers her face as she slowly approaches. As I pay closer attention, however, I notice 2 arms holding onto the railing, and 2 more arms grabbing the ceiling above her. What I thought was tap-dancing shoes was revealed as long bony legs with barb-like claws protruding from her feet. As I scream at the sight, she lifts her head to stare at me, massive mandibles opening wide as she lets out a horrible wail, her 6 pairs of black eyes opening wide as she does so. She rushes over to me, 2 clawed hands grabbing my body and the other 2 grabbing my face. I can feel the warmth of urine as I lose all composure. I panic at her upside down face coming close to my own. The massive mandibles lock onto my face, digging into the 4 corners as I feel the horrible sensation of a fleshy, disgusting tube enter my mouth. I struggle as I feel some kind of fluid go down, well, up my throat, my gag reflex failing me. As she finishes her violation, she backs away and retracts the mandibles into her face. They fold inward and eventually her face looks just like a normal woman. Her many eyes close shut, but then she opens the 2, located in the normal area where human eyes would be. No longer are the eyes a tar-like black light before, but a regular pair of brown human eyes. As I observe her now human-looking face, I recognize who she is. It all comes back to me, who she is, and where I was before I woke up here. You, I say, as I tried to forcefully vomit whatever was now inside of me. I had met her at the coffee shop, where I work. She came in, struck up a conversation, and we had immediately hit it off. By the end of the night, I found myself at her apartment, and in her bed. I remember after we did the deed, I began to get lightheaded. I went to the bathroom and splashed water on my face. As I stared at my reflection, my vision went dark and I passed out right then and there. That was the last thing I remembered before I woke up, hanging upside down by what I previously thought was rope, but am now convinced is some kind of webbing. "Hello dear," she says, in a calm and relaxed tone. "Thank you so much for such a wonderful time." She turns around folding her extra arms behind her back and retracts her claws into her fingers. As she walks back up the stairs, she stops and says one last thing. "I know you'll take good care of them. I'm so happy I met you. You'll make sure they're well fed and grow to be big and strong." Every horrible possibility of what she meant races through my mind. I begin to panic once again, screaming and crying out for someone. Anyone. To help. I soon begin to feel something in my stomach. Oh no. I cry out loud. The pain is excruciating, and it feels like something is tearing me up from inside. I scream as loud as I can and I feel bile coming from my throat, pouring onto the floor. Almost immediately, I pass out and awaken in a bed. I sit up quickly and realize I'm in my room. In my bed. I begin to sob as I realize that it was all a horrible dream. I walk into my bathroom and splash water on my face. I stare at my reflection and realize I look like absolute shit. My complexion is pale like a corpse, and the rings under my eyes add to that comparison. Suddenly, I gag and bile expels from my mouth. The pain is unlike anything else. I grab my abdomen reflexively and notice something odd. I feel around with my hands and realize there are dozens of tiny lumps. They are moving around under my skin inside my body. I scream and scream as they move their way up my body until they reach my throat. Soon after, dozens of bird-sized spiders emerge from my mouth as their sharp, clawed feet scratch the inside of my throat as they climb their way out. I try to scream, but my voice is blocked as one after the other these small monsters are birthed from my esophagus. Once again, I pass out from the pain, the panic, and the exhaustion. I awake, still on the bathroom floor. The lights are still on and I feel all around my body. I feel skinny. Like all of the fat and muscle has been sucked out of me. I am barely strong enough to stand, but I somehow muster the strength to use the bathroom sink to pick myself up. In my reflection, I notice that I look even worse than before. I'm even paler, but now black liquid stains my mouth, chin, and chest. I hear shuffling come from my bedroom, and I slowly approach the door. Shaking, I open it and the shock of what I see leaves me speechless. All around the room, there are children. Small, normal-looking toddlers, completely naked and covered in black slime, sit and stand all around the room. I have no words. I have no idea what to do. I try to speak, but only a small peep comes out. As soon as they hear the sounds of my words failing to come out, they focus their attention on me. There is an uneasy silence as I stare at them. And they stare at me. Suddenly, 4 more sets of eyes open wide as they all let out high-pitched shrieks, their mouths opening wide to reveal horrible-looking mandibles. They rush over to me, and I scream as they latch on. I fall to the floor and mentally prepare myself to be eaten alive. But that doesn't happen. They are hugging me. Tiny arms are wrapped around my arms, legs, and body as they rub their tiny, horrible-looking faces on me. I want to scream, but I don't want to set them off. One of them looks at me right in the eyes, a creepy-looking smile forming as it retracts its mandibles back into its face, the tiny black eyes staring into me. I suppose this means today is my first Father's Day. There were too many doors in the upstairs hall. Sarah told her parents, but they couldn't see it. They told her not to worry. They told her there was nothing there. But there was an extra door at the end of the upstairs hall. An extra yellow door, and it didn't belong. It was the color of disease, jaundiced and infected, with spidery black veins across its face. One perfect, silver knob gleamed in its center, above a shadowy keyhole, and it didn't look right. The doorknob shone with a mirrored finish and caught the light from any angle, begging for Sarah to look its way. Sarah did her best to ignore it, but the door knew her name, and it whispered it when she drew near. Sarah. The door would rest with a voice like dried leaves, as tiny claws scraped against the other side. Tears would well in Sarah's eyes as she'd hurry past, her arms laden with everything she'd need to get ready for the day. Sarah. It would call again before she'd shuffled out of range and closed the bathroom door, cutting off its paper-thin wails. When she'd creep from the bathroom to head downstairs, the door's voice would follow her with a furious flurry of scraping claws and tormented howls. They lingered and gnawed in the back of her mind as she'd rush through breakfast so she could leave the house a few minutes sooner. School became a blessing, an excuse to be someone somewhere else. At school, she could forget the door. At school, she could pretend her house was like everyone else's, with the right number of doors and no eerie whispers. But, at the end of the day, it was still waiting for her at the end of the upstairs hall, with its mirrored wall knob and yellow face. She hated coming home and knowing it was there, but even more than that, she hated going to sleep, because in her dreams, she opened the door. Every night, she stood before it, fighting the urge to reach out. Dread knotted her belly in anticipation of pain when her hand rose anyway to grasp the silver knob. Some nights, it burned her like the driest ice. Other nights, it seared like a red-hot coal. Very occasionally, it did neither, instead turning and turning without ever opening the door, and she couldn't stop turning it until she woke up. When the door did open, it revealed a swirling vortex of shadow and sound, with 1,000 voices crying in the darkness. The voices curled around her, crawling through her hair like spiders. She threshed and swatted at their skittering whispers, but the words still tingled across her skin. She never should have listened. He sees. They said. He hears. They moaned. He hungers. They wept and burrowed into her mind like worms. The hollow man, they echoed in her mind and screamed to her from the gaping vortex. The hollow man. He hunts. Sarah shot up with a scream that night, gasping and sweating, but alone in her bed. The clock's crimson face said midnight had passed, but not by much. Darkness enveloped her room, except where a vestigial nightlight illumined the corner by her desk. It wasn't much, but she felt better when she saw it. She pulled the bedsheets over her head and pushed away the echoing voices. I'm fine, she swore, hugging her knees and rocking. It's just a dream. They're always dreams. The dreams will go away like they always do. She started humming a song her mother used to sing when Sarah was smaller, small enough to need the nightlight, and the panic faded little by little with every note. Just a dream, she repeated. Just a dream. Just a, Sarah? Someone whispered from the hall. Sarah froze. Sarah? Are you Sarah? It was the voice of a girl not much younger than Sarah, and not at all like the voice she usually heard from the door at the end of the hall. Who? Who are you? Sarah whispered back from beneath the sheets. My name is Lizzie. Are you Sarah? Sarah didn't move. She was terrified of leaving the safety of her cocoon. As the moments ticked past, however, an anxious curiosity emboldened her enough to peek out from the covers. What if it was another girl? She thought. She sounded just as scared as Sarah felt. Sarah crawled from her bed, clutching the sweat-damp nightshirt she'd worn to sleep, and waited. When nothing happened, she stood up and tiptoed towards her bedroom door, toward the waiting yellow door, with a mirror wall knob on the wall at the end of the upstairs hall. When she stood before it, her stomach lurched, and for a moment, she couldn't tell if she was going to vomit or faint. "Please," the door said in the young girl's voice, when Sarah got close. "Please, are you Sarah?" Sarah opened her mouth to answer, but her voice was a tiny squeak of nothing. She pressed her palms to her cheeks and smeared away the tears before trying again. "Yes," she finally managed. "I'm Sarah. Please, let me in." The door's silvery knob shook violently, rattling as if locked and jostled by someone on the other side. Sarah stumbled back, with a gasp, staring at the shuddering, alien knob. "Let me in, Sarah, please. I can't stand here. Please help me. Let me in." Sarah dropped to her knees when her legs gave out, and she screamed when she looked at the door. Level with a shadowy keyhole, below the rattling knob, she stared directly into a very human eye. Tears shimmered in the other eye as they shimmered in Sarah's. It darted around, white and white with fear, as if searching through the hall. And then, without warning, the keyhole became shadow, and the silver knob stilled, and the girl on the other side of the door began to cry. "Please, Sarah," she pleaded, "he's almost here. The Hollow Man." Sarah whispered as a chill slithered up her spine. Lizzie sobbed quietly. Sarah scooted closer to the door, her fear growing colder when the girl from the other side didn't answer. "Lizzie?" Silence fell as if it had always been there. She couldn't hear Lizzie crying anymore, and even the house was too quiet behind her. Sarah put her ear near the door and held her breath. She waited. Minutes passed, but it couldn't have been minutes. Nothing moved. Nothing whispered. Nothing cried. Nothing stirred. She couldn't hear anything but her own racing heart. Was she gone? "Lizzie?" She tried again, afraid the Hollow Man had taken her. "He's here." Lizzie whispered at last, almost in her ear, as though Lizzie's lips pressed tight against the keyhole. "Please, let me in." Sarah's head ached. The world was a little fuzzy around the edges, and it was harder to focus than before. She had to stand up. She didn't dare touch the sickly door, but her legs felt too wobbly and weak to support her. She reached for the knob with a trembling hand. "Please, Sarah." Lizzie's voice was getting smaller. "Please." Grasping the mirror wall knob, she pulled herself up from the floor. It moved noiselessly beneath her hand, gliding without resistance, and opened the yellow door. A lonely expanse of normal wall inched into view, and she felt sick. She worried at her thumb in confusion, and extended a trembling hand to touch the wall behind the door. It was solid. As solid and as normal as the wall at the end of the upstairs hall should be, but her stomach churned. She gently closed the door, which issued a soft click as the latch sprang into place, and waited. She hardly dared to move or breathe as she listened to the night, waiting for the door to speak again. Hours passed in oppressive silence, even though it couldn't have been hours, and the door had nothing to say. Sarah grew sleepy, too sleepy to keep standing. Too sleepy to remember why she was standing so still at the end of the upstairs hall. It was time to go to bed. "It's just a dream," she remembered, turning away and rubbing at her eyes. "They're always dreams." Shuffling to her bed was like swimming through jello, and most of the way there she couldn't keep her eyes open. Luckily, she knew the way. The dreams will go away like they always do. The crimson clock was broken when she rolled herself back in bed, its face declaring 12:16 a.m. to a room that only vaguely felt familiar, but she couldn't bring herself to care when her eyes and body felt so heavy. "Sarah." Lizzie whispered. But it couldn't be a whisper. "Sarah," Lizzie whispered, "Sarah, don't wake up." Sarah groaned a little. "Don't wake up," Lizzie said, her voice echoing in Sarah's mind. Sarah frowned and rolled onto her back. She didn't want to wake up. She wanted to stay asleep. Lizzie didn't need to tell her not to wake, because not being awake was the whole point of being asleep. For a long time, all was silence. Sarah's mind drifted, and she felt herself grow lighter, as if getting ready to float up through the blackness that surrounded her. She could feel the cool sheets beneath her then, and for a moment, she thought she heard the papery thin rustle of leaves in her room. "He's here," Lizzie whispered at last. "Please, don't wake up." "Who's here?" Sarah wondered as she steadily rose. His hollow face, an eerie mask. With hollow voice at doors will ask to be invited into task. Above his favorite midnight task. A strange tingling worked its way up Sarah's body as Lizzie recited the haunting rhyme in a disconcerting monotone. Clarity inched its way toward her slowly, melting away the fog of sleep. Hadn't she been dreaming? Was she still dreaming? Something was wrong. "He's waiting inches from your face to be the first thing your eyes grace. But keep them shut, or else embrace a hollow shell to take your place." Cold dread seized Sarah's heart with each new stanza, and she trembled with the weight of her mistake. For a moment, she swore she could feel the air stir above her, stale and strangely warm against her cheeks. Leaves rustled above her bed. "The yellow door you always keep. He follows you to where you sleep. Into your room he then will creep. Your life and dreams for him to reap." Lizzie's voice became little more than a breath within Sarah's mind, and the air cooled around her when a pressure lifted from her chest. The leaves were in the hall. The hollow man above your bed, with hollow eyes, deep slumber fed. His hollow dreams may fill your head, but never peek or you'll be dead. Everything was wrong. Distantly, Sarah registered the sound of her parents screaming in their room and felt tears sliding down her cheeks. No longer dream tears, she could feel the wet warmth as each one fell. "Mommy," Sarah whispered, the sound paper thin. "Daddy," she rasped with a voice like dried leaves. "Lizzie?" she thought, but Lizzie did not respond. Silence fell over the house, and Sarah knew nothing would ever be right again. From the hall outside her bedroom door, Sarah heard the soft click as a latch sprang into place, and waited. Silence filled the house again. The leaves were gone. Sunlight peeked through the curtains, and the crimson clock said it was 7:45 a.m. before she felt it was safe enough to open her eyes and leave her room. The yellow door, with its mirror wall knob, stared at her from the wall at the end of the upstairs hall, and the house was still too quiet. It was a different quiet than before, though, a different quiet than from her dream. It was the quiet of a tomb. Except, of course, for the occasional tapping, as if from tiny claws, from the other side of the yellow door.